So Stephanie put the agenda into the chat, but basically looking at a couple of like intros at the beginning of this and dropping in your names into the sign-in sheet. Then I just briefly want to like run through some of the context and like review what we looked at in previous meetings and what we accomplished and decided and so on and so forth, and basically like tie the thread of what we're getting into today, which is a proposed recommendation, which is basically to cover the costs to sustain Valley Can's 40-hour program at Delta College, which is where they've actually placed 2 programs there. We can get into the specifics of that. And we have Tom Knox and Rocky Carlisle from Valley Can to answer questions as well. And then just getting some like next steps and commitments. And it's a tight group and a fairly tight agenda, so we might be able to get out of here fairly early today too, which could be good. But I can start off with intros. I just want to pass them around. Taylor Williams, I sit on the CSC as a resident, and I'm the co-lead on the EVMT subcommittee, and with Ed Ward, who I don't think can make it today, but I'll pass it over to Stephanie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie, and I'm Air Quality Specialist in the Community Strategies and Resources Department, which oversees the implementation of AB 617. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Eric.
Hello, everybody. So I don't know if you were here before. Now our team's doubled by 2, so we're up by 100%. I'm also under Jess. I'm also an air quality specialist under the CSR team. I'm going to be specializing in Arvin and Lamont hopefully soon. And I'm happy to meet you all and see you all again, and whoever I didn't meet.
Yeah, Eric's doing the whole full onboarding of all of our communities, but soon we'll be working pretty closely with our Arvin and Lamont community down in South Kern. But you'll probably see him in a lot of our meetings across the district. And maybe we'll just round off district folk and go with Juan Luis.
Thank you, Stephanie, and hello, everyone. Juan Luis Carranza, Senior Communications Rep here at the Valley Air District and part of the team at the Outreach and Communications Department, also supporting the implementation of the AB 617 project, specifically in the city of Stockton. So very glad to be here. And then I'll pass it on to Scott.
Hi, good afternoon. Scott Wall with the California Air Resources Board, and I work in the AB 617 program as the community liaison to the Stockton Community Steering Committee. And Taylor, you said this small group will get out of here in time. I've learned that whenever you say that, the meetings go late. So just
us.
A word of caution. A word of caution. And with that, I will pass it over to Tom.
I'm Tom Knox at Valley Clean Air Now. We've been working on that maintenance program throughout the San Joaquin Valley Community Colleges for the last few years, thanks to Rocky Carlisle's expertise here. And I'll hand it over to Rocky.
Yeah, I'm Rocky Carlisle. I'm the Workforce Development Manager for Valley Can, and formerly with the Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Nate, you want to go next?
Hello, I had trouble getting my mute button there. Yes, I'm here representing the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water with SP Bielma, who's in a working conference, I think in Santa Cruz or something like that. And unfortunately, I can only be here for a while. I'm going to have to leave almost precisely at 4:25 because as the board chair of the Central Valley Asian Chamber, I'm hosting a business mixer in downtown Stockton, for which I have to be there at 4:55 p.m. And I'm going by foot, by the way. So I'll do as much as I can in 15 minutes. I will mention real briefly, since this is EV equipment, and some of you already know this, but I was the director of planning for San Joaquin Regional Transit District in Stockton for about 12 years. And first we pioneered diesel electric hybrid buses, but then we were the second transit agency in California, 4th in the nation, to do quick charge Proterra buses. And now they're going to extended battery and depot chargers. But the point is, I have a fair amount of experience, at least in the transit world, working with heavy duty electric vehicles. And I've owned and driven many hybrid vehicles. and a couple electrics. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Thrilled you're here. Jennifer, you want to round us out?
Yeah, hello, hi. My name's Jennifer. I'm just a resident. This is my first time at the meeting, and I'm just here for the updates. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Cool. Well, I want to make sure that we're all like up to speed on the kind of context setting for the last couple of subcommittee meetings and the things that we've done up until now. So I'll just briefly review from the February meeting and then the April meeting, what we had talked about in those subcommittee meetings. So first one being our first convening, kind of like our kickoff, where we had taken a bunch of feedback that we had gotten original, like in a broader CSC meeting from like a breakout room, and developed what we had learned from priorities and from conversations with Delta College and with Valley Clean Air Now into basically like 3 options to describe a broad pipeline of EV mechanics in Stockton, basically at the beginning of that pipeline, the middle of it, and then the end of it, to put it in its broadest terms. And by the end of that meeting, there was broad alignment around investing in like the first part of that, i.e. like a high school age program, kind of introductory to get students foot in the door into a pipeline for EV mechanics training, and then eventually into a job. So we took that and reached out to a couple of dealers and the California New Car Dealers Association, which Tom and Rocky were kind enough to connect us with, who shared basically what skills are they hiring for and gave us a sense of, you know, as we're talking about mechanics training, what we should be acknowledging as what we should be training for and matching with the needs of employers. Following that, and since then, we've been having conversations with Valley Can, so Tom and Rocky, who I think it would actually be useful, not to put you on the spot, but Tom, if you want to share about the programs that y'all have and the ones that we're talking about today relative to the recommendation, it might be helpful just to ground people in some context for that.
Yeah, sure. I'm not the expert, so I'm going to put Rocky on the spot, but I guess just quick intro. About 3 years ago, thanks to Rocky's expertise coming from BAR, where he helped oversee vehicle maintenance training programs at community colleges statewide. We had identified that there's a major gap in vehicle maintenance training. There's a well-developed system to get trained and certified to repair gas-powered vehicles, but the new system for training EV mechanics was never put together for a variety of reasons. So Rocky jumped into that and kind of got together his network of experts around the state, and so now they put together a series of curriculums that are now being taught at 7 different Silicon Valley community colleges. We really favor community college automotive programs. They're public institutions. They're not for profit. They are very, very committed to kind of producing the next generation of really committed technicians. And so Valley Can has been working with the community college vehicle programs for 10 to 15 years. They're really a major part of the success of our Tune In Tune Up program, because as Rocky's experience with the Inspection and Maintenance Review Committee revealed, the one kind of common factor among shops that produce great emissions repairs that serve the needs of customers best are people who were trained by instructors that really actually care, and that's what colleges have. Not to speak ill on for-profit training institutions, but we strongly support public institutions. So sorry for that sermon there. I'll hand it over to Rocky for some more details on the college programs and high school, excuse me.
Yeah, to add to the 7 colleges, we do have 4 high schools MDOL in the training program. They only teach the 40-hour introductory course, but we have one other course, which is a 4-unit course, basically a full semester course on basic electronic vehicle maintenance and diagnosis. And we have another one in development. It's another 4-unit course, which is advanced and goes into more detail on all the ancillary systems, such as regenerative braking, electric brakes, electric power steering, and that kind of thing.
What, and so Rocky, the basic kind of issue that we had learned is that, you know, there's a shortage of these technicians that's actually affecting the ability of EV drivers to get their cars serviced easily. Most EVs get serviced at franchise auto dealers at this point. They'll probably continue that way for a while. And there just aren't enough to go around, which causes delays. It might even cause folks to need to go to the next city to get their EVs serviced. And so that's a problem, but the opportunity here is that means there are well-paying jobs available. And, you know, if, you know, someone's got that training, you know, the briefing that CNCDA held for this committee, you know, shows that you're very employable, and that is a skill that can really be taken to any part of the state. I think it's fair to say San Joaquin Valley is unique right now in the state for having these maintenance training programs available. So this it should be one of those things where the valley is kind of way ahead of the rest of the state on you know, this really important issue that is then to the benefit of residents of disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, I would agree. I spoke with the dealerships in Bakersfield, and even with only the 40-hour introductory course, they were willing to hire that student as an entry-level tech. So I think that speaks volumes about the need for training.
Yeah. One thing I also want to double down on relative to goals with AB 617 is you described, Tom, the lack of like workforce for servicing vehicles, like what has an effect on the market for them, right? So getting more EVs on the road is going to reduce vehicle miles traveled and therefore greenhouse gas emissions. So it all kind of fits into like the broader outcomes that we're trying to drive in this group as well. I should say criteria pollutants rather, reducing criteria pollutants. And then one other thing I'll point to, I think I glossed over briefly, was an important outcome of our conversation, our panel with CNCDA, the California Car Dealers Association, and with Tracy Mazda, who also came to speak. They pointed to the pipeline that we had kind of theorized at the top of this was not as like clear cut as it was, that they will bring people on pretty fresh and then they'll like move their way up through a career while they're at a dealership, and they can go to programs like Valley Cans and the ones that they've already placed at like Delta College, which I think was a super important thing to be able to learn too. So since then, relative to where our thinking is to lead to the recommendation that we like are proposing today is twofold. So conversations with the school district and conversations with Delta College, where currently Valley Cam programs are already placed. So Tom or Rocky, do you mind just speaking a little bit about those two conversations that you've been having?
Sorry.
Talking about Delta College?
Yeah, and the school district, SUSD.
Yeah, Delta College has been very proactive. They've undertaken the 40 hours so far. They're going to also start teaching the 4-unit course as well as the advanced course when it's ready. The difficulty we've had with the school district in San Joaquin is a lack of instructors and a lack of available room to teach the class. That was conveyed to me by Nathan, forgive me, I forget his last name. He works for the US, you know, the school district, but it might be Nathan Hale. Does that ring a bell? So
Oh, that's right.
that's been the drawback to the high schools in the San Joaquin Valley, or I'm sorry, in Stockton area. Other high schools, we've got high school in Merced and Livingston, and then we've I think it's Livingston High School and Merced High School, as well as Golden Gate High School and Redwood High School in Visalia. So, and they're very excited about the program. The two high schools in Visalia have already taught the program, and the two in, excuse me, the two other high schools are going to teach it this next semester.
So, okay, yeah. So relative to conversations with SUSD, to start there, I guess, it sounded like you were hitting some roadblocks with them relative to, they don't have the instructors to actually teach the curriculum that y'all provide, or the space to teach it in. Is that a fair assessment of that conversation?
Yeah, that was what was conveyed to me in our last meeting back in, I believe it was February or March.
Got it. And then relative to Delta, you've already placed two of your programs there. It sounds like Jennifer and some others that she knows have already been through that as well, which is fantastic. So the programs are already placed at Delta, which is where I think we're kind of getting into the recommendation of what has led to this conversation today. But also want to pause because we just shared a lot, I feel like, and want to pause for questions or clarification.
Maybe I'll just provide a little context maybe for those who haven't been with us kind of through this whole process of, we kind of started off in February with a meeting in which we had these options and a lot of folks were interested in potentially working with Stockton Unified School District. And now kind of we've gotten to this point in working with Valley Can and Rocky, who specifically kind of started this process of trying to reach out to Stockton Unified, has kind of hit these roadblocks. Now the group and kind of this recommendation is pivoting a little bit more to Delta College, which kind of is working with Valley Can already on these 40-hour class. So in terms of I guess roads of potential partnerships, just having a little bit of trouble with Stockton Unified and pivoting more towards this route of Delta now, which is kind of building up to this new recommendation. But I guess if any folks on this this subcommittee have thoughts about, because I know that there was strong preference towards working with Stockton Unified, if anyone wants to kind of share any feelings or thoughts about that, I think we're totally open in this group to hearing about that.
Sorry, I just want to ask Rocky, it's tough working with schools right now, and we're not trying to point fingers at Stockton Unified. It's really hard to get things going at schools and school districts, etc. Rocky, if Delta continues to ramp up its maintenance course offerings, and it seems like there's no reason that high school students couldn't take advantage of that at Delta, right? I mean, don't high school students take courses at community colleges?
Yeah, they can utilize dual enrollment, and so that's a big benefit. And I don't mean to point fingers at Stockton. There's other high school areas where I've had problems where we've had good conversations about implementing the program, and all of a sudden it's they're incommunicado. And never return my phone calls or emails. So on those, I have no reason as to why.
So it's not really either or, right?
No.
It'd be great to have this Stockton Unified. It would, that's obviously a great link directly to teenage students, but at Delta, it could be both high school and college age students.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the initial issues were maybe just around, Rocky, you had heard that maybe spacing actually at Stockton Unified Schools was potentially one of the issues of actually being on grounds of the high school. But again, we're hearing that this course is open to high schoolers.
Correct.
And I'm seeing a comment from Jennifer that I'll just read out. Most of the learning took place online. How about online classes?
Yeah, on the online component was really the instructional component. And then, of course, the labs, they had to come into the campus for labs. And that was due to COVID concerns. Labs cannot in any way be done online. I don't care what the platform is, simply because you cannot demonstrate competency when we're talking about high voltage battery systems. And so most of the instructors refuse to do a complete online class with EV, products.
To clarify, Jennifer was referencing the 40-hour class at Delta. That is the Valley CAN program itself, right?
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Cool. All right. Any other questions before we talk about like this recommendation we've proposed for today? Okay. So basically what we were into the agenda today is what's being proposed, right? So now that there are 2 established programs at Delta, what we have identified is a need to cover some costs to sustain that sustain Delta's ability to host Valley CAN's 40-hour program long term. So basically covering staff capacity to embed the curriculum in Delta's courses. Also funding capacity to enable partnerships with local employers. So that's dealerships, that might be RTD. I know Nate's not on the call anymore, but just people who have hiring needs for electric vehicle mechanics, as well as an additional cost for like books, instructional materials, and equipment, which could include accessing damaged and totaled vehicles for students to work on. So that's basically like what we're proposing. And if folks at the Valley CAN want to add any more context to why that is needed, like how that benefits students and career pathways, I'd love to hear more as well.
Well, I think anytime they're involved in or have experienced EV training, they're going to be a better asset for the new car dealers, especially because as the sales of those cars proliferate, there's going to be more and more need to have service done on those. And it might be a simple service. Nevertheless, to even open the hood on one of those, they have to be certified, at least with the basics of safety. Because unlike a 12-volt battery that won't do anything basically to you, physically the batteries in these EVs will kill you if you mishandle them. So it's a big safety issue, and a vicarious liability for the dealership if they fail to adhere to that standard.
Scott?
So I just want to preface this, I guess, question or comment or observation with this is not an official CARB position. This is actually Scott Wald is being curious. When we look at the funds coming out of the AB 617 funding pot for this community of Stockton, and kind of where the funds are going and how they're being spent, I guess just in my mind, I'm thinking, how is it that we can ensure that this program, at least at a minimum, gives preference to the Stockton AB 617 area as far as the students going through that program? Maybe it's giving car dealerships first dibs at kind of coming in to recruit, or I mean, just thinking about like what's going to stop actually people from enrolling in Delta College, going through this program, and then going to San Jose or San Francisco, where the jobs pay actually a lot more. And so then really your $617 have not been efficiently used to help, achieve basically improvement in Stockton. So just something to think about, I guess, as you go through this process.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Scott. part of that was, I think, we're trying to address relative to like those partnerships with employers in terms of placing people locally. But you've also named like this is for an AB 617 boundary area too, which means the like recruitment into these programs is going to be very important as well, to keep those focused. That's something we have to continue thinking through too. Stephanie?
Thanks, and that's a great point, Scott. And I think I'll add to kind of like the things to consider too. And so just generally, I'll kind of share with the group, and I think people have kind of heard this and Scott knows it super well, but generally what we're looking at in terms of kind of moving this project forward is it will need a project plan, which is just kind of generally guidelines describing how these funds are to be used. That later goes on to our state agency CARB. And once that's kind of approved, that's what is essentially enabling us to use the funding on this program. And so I think this is great to kind of start outlining what potentially these costs could be used for, because that's really going to be the bulk of what we're needing to describe is, there's $150K allocated to this CERT measure, like what is it actually going to be used for? So I think just honing down on what this might actually look like, in addition to what Scott's saying about, and Taylor kind of emphasizing of, this is something that is geared towards a certain area within our Southwest Stockton. And so those are things to think about as well. And so I think in terms of something that I think I'd want the group to think about, and especially Valley Can, is what specifically that amount of money, what it might look like kind of in a timeline, or staff time is definitely, I'm sure, a great thing that'll support, but what is that? I guess I'd be wondering, what does that look like kind of long-term? Like how far does that get you in getting these courses fully embedded into Delta's like long-term curriculum as well? And I'm wondering if I can actually share a project plan and what it might look like, and I can walk us through some of the sections of things that we'll want to think about as a group as well. And I'll preface this to kind of say this project plan that I'm going to show you was written way on in the early days. It was actually submitted for Shafter and Fresno, which have the same measure essentially. But this was, again, before kind of this big effort in subcommittee happened here. So some of the things will need to be refined, definitely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so we can all get a sense of what potentially like a project plan might look like. Just in terms of the structure, if you've popped into any of our other project plans, a lot of the kind of sections are very similar, but some of the things I'll kind of draw our eyes to is, again, this is going to look different because this is something that we wrote very early on in the process before a lot of this effort was happening in the subcommittee, but just generally kind of ideas of what the district is kind of ready to be supportive about. Definitely in terms of who's eligible for these fundings, qualifying applicants, it could be a couple of different people, but one of the things is public educational institutions, which generally, the district is supportive of supporting, various institutions such as Delta. And some of the things that we'll need just to kind of hone down on are just like these participant requirements, but I think getting to this point of what can actually be funded. And I think previously, before we knew a lot about, all the ongoing efforts that are already happening valley-wide, we at that time had thought of developing courses, but now this section I think will be definitely geared more towards kind of supporting what's already going on kind of valley-wide in this field. But here are just some sections to kind of ponder. And just in the district's commitment, generally we'll kind of say we're going to work pretty closely with CARB just to kind of begin these conversations about eligible costs just on our end and what's kind of fundable with this money. But also, I think as we start to discuss more about what we might want to put in this project plan, the kind of parallel to that, the district is working on getting like a draft out that we definitely want to get out to the subcommittee for feedback. So we'll hope to get that out soon. Anyone have any questions on this kind of more programmatic project plan part of this process? And also Scott's here. I know Scott definitely knows about this as well.
Well, and so I guess this might be an appropriate time. And I guess before I hop in and add on to that, we're kind of just kind of adding on to each other's stuff here. Tom, I saw that you had your hand up a few minutes ago. Did you have a specific question to anything that either of us had discussed so far?
Oh, I mean, just a quick response to how does this serve 617 residents? And I mean, this isn't as specific to 617, but I mean, in general, and not to generalize, but many community college students, especially automotive students, are coming from disadvantaged communities, as per Colin Virus screen. So there isn't an exact match there, but it certainly is a pretty strong correlation.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think I guess my point being that, these funds were, I guess, targeted to the Stockton AB 617 area, and just making sure that you do your best to think about how that area designated under the program is going to benefit from this program, I guess, was just the main thing that I wanted to, my example of, like, somebody comes in to Delta College, maybe they come in from Sacramento, take the classes, and then go to San Francisco, and they're kind of benefiting from these funds when really Stockton got nothing out of the whole deal. And so was my only point about that. But I do want to talk actually a little bit about the funding, because I did a little bit of homework. And basically, with these community identified projects, this is very clearly a project that has kind of percolated up from the community. It's not something the district is driving. The specifics of how you're actually directing these funds to be spent are, again, community identified and actually community kind of ideas. And so with that, with the community air protection funding guidelines, there's tons of flexibility in how it gets spent. Just, it's really a matter of being clear on how it's getting spent, right? So to Stephanie's point earlier, so there is tons of flexibility because that's just what the program is all about. So at first glance, when I shared, Taylor, you kind of proposed of the recommendation of covering costs and all that with our incentives group, there was really no red or even yellow flags that they saw immediately, but just the guidance was really more just having some specificity. I said it right for once in my life. Having some specificity around kind of how it's going to be spent.
I have a question relative to, because I mean, I'm kind of confined now. I'm stumbling on words, but I'm also concerned about making sure that, like, this is a specific area. Oh my God, I'm blowing it in Stockton, right? And how we're being really intentional about making sure that the folks, because it becomes a recruitment issue, right? It's not necessarily where the jobs are, it's where the people are who are benefiting from those jobs. So maybe that's something we can work with the outreach committee on, or include costs like that are for marketing and outreach directly in that community, or both. But I'm curious to hear others' thoughts on that, because I appreciate you raising that concern, and it's in my head now.
Taylor, I think it could be. Now I'm stumbling.
It's contagious.
I think it can, right? I think it can be like, in my initial thought, and again, this is not a carb position, but my initial thought is it could be a two-pronged approach, right? Maybe you're recruiting residents in the AB 617 area to enroll and increase their skills. And maybe you're giving preference, like one of the ideas that I had earlier, maybe you're giving, if there are dealerships in the 617 area, if not, maybe kind of adjacent to or kind of within a certain radius around the 617 area, maybe you're giving dealerships preference to recruiting those folks by giving them some type of preferential access to those students while they're going through the program. And that, and maybe it's a both, so that you're really, the likelihood of the cars being driven around in those dealerships being from that community are much higher. So it's, again, I don't really have any strong opinions or feelings, but I just think it's something that really should be considered.
And I'll add, I guess, even if part of the staff time that I'm seeing, like part of it is involved in outreach specifically to our boundary as well. That could be, I'm not quite sure exactly what staff would be doing day to day, but if any part of that is able to be related to like doing outreach in the boundary, to support these courses. That could be another avenue in which we are staying within our boundary. Go for it, Tom.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to remind Taylor about the New Car Dealers Association. I think that the suggestion about somehow kind of steering the graduates into the jobs and figuring out how to have a 617 element about that. I think the New Car Dealers Association is so supportive of these efforts that I think they can come up with a creative solution for that, which is it's up to their members, but they are very motivated to kind of be part of a win here.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe part of that employer partnerships looks like working with CNCDA to do that outreach or support with that outreach. Is that what you're saying?
Post course placement.
Okay. I guess Scott, if I'm hearing you right, the concern is getting the right people in the door in the first place, right? For like recruitment into the program. Is that a fair synthesis, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, I really can't come at this with any strong feelings or opinions. I guess what I'm trying to do is just give you things to think about as far as AB 617 funding and what is it you're trying to accomplish with these dollars. And there are potentially a couple of different pathways, just from my personal perspective, that you could draw a line toward benefiting the community with those funds. And those are my first couple of brainstorms, but certainly not comprehensive by any means. But just as I began to kind of just think about the funds and like how things could shake out with the money, where Stockton doesn't benefit at all from this $150,000, that's a possibility. So what does this subcommittee, I guess, think that should be put in place, I guess, to avoid that? That was really my only point. And that's the reason why I'm trying to be very, very kind of particular between differentiating. This is Scott speaking, Scott concerns, and a CARB. This is not an official CARB position at all. I really have no excuse actually opening my mouth at all, because this is a community program, but I just, knowing that these are 617 funds, would really encourage you all to consider that.
Right. And you're just asking questions. I get it. And again, not to put anyone on the spot, but Jennifer, you mentioned that you've been through the program as well. I'm curious how you came across it, or maybe that will be some insight into, given you're a resident of the boundary area, maybe that would be helpful insight as well.
I just got lucky. I happened to be on the Delta website, and I happened to see the class was available, and I got it. There was a max of 20 students that could take a class, and I happened to be like the last one.
Nice.
I just stumbled upon it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Rocky, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a question with regard to 617 funds. Scott mentioned an incentive for dealers to hire these students. Can some of those 617 funds be used for that incentive, or is that a different checkbook?
I didn't actually specifically talk about incentivizing dealers. I don't think it was really more giving them preferential access to the students graduating from this, since there does seem to be, it sounds to me like a scramble for bodies in these dealerships. I remember that panel, like they're just having a hard time, like it sounded like they were just willing to take a warm body and hope that they stick around for a few days, right? So I don't know that, I didn't suggest, or I think put out the idea of incentivizing the dealers for hiring them, but I would say right now, within the community emissions reduction program, there is no designation for that type of allocation of the funding in Stockton. So that would need to be a larger steering committee discussion whether or not they would like to consider going into that, and if so, what measures they actually want to pull money from to do that. So I think, again, not saying it can't be done, but certainly was not, I guess, the intent of what I was recommending at all.
My apologies, Scott.
No.
I misinterpreted what you were
No.
saying.
No worries. No, I always appreciate clarifying, and appreciate you asking the question. I just was thinking, if there are dealerships in the area, they might actually, be able to kind of have, I guess, first dibs at meeting or interviewing or talking to the graduates. And that would be kind of a double fold way of ensuring that these incentive funds that are designated for Stockton actually do benefit Stockton.
It does bring up an interesting point, though. Until June of next year, Delta is running a program called 1,000 Internships, where they basically subsidize employers to take on interns that are Delta students. Given these programs are at Delta and like that eligibility, that box is already checked, that might be a good avenue from the job placement side for somebody to be making those relationships with dealerships. Basically, the incentive would be for dealerships that they don't have to, that Delta is paying the cost of hiring like an intern, we'll say, and dealers will get a sense of, this is somebody who can like stick around. They stuck around for a full internship. Like that's more than a warm body at that point, and could stick around for after the conclusion of that internship, as I riff off the top of my head.
No, I think it's anywhere you can make those connections and partnerships and kind of leverage. I think that those are absolutely brilliant ideas.
So Stephanie, I'm wondering, relative to your next steps of getting a project plan together and eligible costs, I think there's still a bit of work to do relative to getting some like outreach or some other measure to make sure that we're like focusing the benefits in Stockton, but feels a little bit closer. Yeah, I guess like where do you view us as relative to like your next steps on a project plan?
Yeah, I'll just say generally that our goal is to kind of ensure that the project plans, like, yeah, they do kind of generally cover it, but I do think we do try and kind of stay pretty broad with the topic. We're not going to hone down like must pay X amount of money like at this date, at this time kind of thing. We're going to try our best to keep it broad, but so if there's like we're learning lots of, as we learn more information and might need to pivot in places. So I think we'll still continue on and trying to get as much as we can based on our conversation so far. But yeah, I think if there's still some more, background work that needs to be done, that's totally something that we're still open to working with the subcommittee. We're not going to like push it through to CARB without having the subcommittee had like, happy with the proposal and happy with the project plan too. But I guess I will just kind of say now, as you're riffing, Taylor, I guess we kind of had this recommendation of supporting Delta, but now I'm maybe hearing some suggestions about maybe catching the tail end of supporting folks that are maybe looking to be placed and getting them, internships to potentially support job placement long-term. So I guess I'm just curious if maybe folks are still wanting to do a little more groundwork and research, or still feeling pretty good about that initial recommendation. We're open either way. And I'm sure kind of Scott's general core position and not a Scott Wall position is we're open to hearing what the subcommittee is kind of wanting to move next.
I can share my point of view, but I feel like I've taken up a lot of different rooms. So Jennifer, you want to share as well?
Hello. Yeah, I was gonna say that after the 40-hour class, I had a pretty good idea of working on cars, but I wouldn't go out and get a job with what I learned. I think I need to get more training, more learning. Yeah, that was all.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think one of the things that may be missing is these courses are designed for students that are already enrolled in automotive technology, because although we're focusing here on EVs, there's certainly some basics they have to understand before they enroll in EV technology courses.
I agree, but there was a lot of the electronics that we didn't get to really test out, like the meters, and I think that was important to know.
Oh, that is important to know. I appreciate that.
You had mentioned some of your classmates, Jennifer, had taken work at Tesla as well. Were those just continued training opportunities, or I'm curious, like, to the best of like your knowledge, that people are going to some opportunities and you didn't necessarily feel equipped from that course to go into one.
To the best of my knowledge, all I know is that teacher said there's an opportunity for internship. Who wants to go? And 4 or 5 students said, "Hey, I'll go," and they signed up.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess I'll share that, like, in general, I think broadly, like the recommendation makes sense, but like maybe adding in these pieces around, like just recognizing, Jennifer, what you shared, that like you can just jump right into like an automotive like mechanic job right out the
Yeah,
gate.
I didn't have previous mechanic training, but I did all right. Except for the voltage, I really struggled with the voltage. But there's a lot of math and there's a lot of mechanic, like just general mechanics. And I had to learn that by myself. But maybe we could ask a teacher to join next meeting. Maybe he would give you some input.
That's a good idea. Get an instructor in the room.
Yeah.
Who is our instructor at? Oh, go ahead.
No.
Who is our instructor at Delta?
It was Mr. Bonneman.
Yeah. Dan Bonema.
Okay. Are we able to, Rocky, reach out to Dan and pull him into the room for a conversation as well?
I'm sure he would be open to that.
Okay. Seems like a good next step. Cool. Stephanie, others to round us out?
Yeah, and I guess I'm just thinking of something that I think Tom had said just like earlier, just like not either or situation. I think if it's something that I guess I'm still trying to piece together is if it's the case that this funding would be appropriate to cover kind of multiple routes of things, like one supporting in some way kind of getting this course embedded into like Delta's long-term courses, but then could it also in some way kind of support the post, like finish the course trying to get set up with an internship. Those are things that maybe I personally don't have too much knowledge of, like what that would look like funding wise. But I think just generally, if it's the case that the subcommittee is supportive of that and the funding could be make a dent, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in both of those pots, then that's certainly something we can kind of try and keep open and work into the project plan. Again, I guess I'd be curious from, and if you don't have the answer now, we can totally touch base about it later, but generally, like what is this 150K, like how much can we get for it in terms of if we wanted to support kind of both ends of this structure of like the course load and like people taking the course, and then also like getting people actually into internships, potentially have long-term jobs.
That's a question for Valley Cam.
I think so. I believe maybe you would know a little bit more about what that would look like. I'm assuming an intern, supporting like an intern kind of does sound a little bit more hefty to me in terms of costs, but in terms of like staff time, of how much staff maybe you'd need to get these courses embedded into Delta's like long-term curriculum. Those are just things in my head. I don't really have like a ballpark idea of what that would look like.
That's actually being done by Dan. I mean, getting them embedded is anywhere from a 12 to 18 month process after they start with the curriculum committee. It's very arduous. It shouldn't be, but it is. And I know that was his intent. I don't know if he needs additional staff to do that, but I can certainly check on that.
So all roads are leading back to Dan at this, maybe at this point. Maybe it'd be great to get Dan in the room.
And so that kind of long-term sustainability thing, as Rocky said, like that's kind of the intent of them starting to do the program, is then they work through the whole curriculum process, which is very lengthy. And so they might be like halfway through that at this point, but that, you know, that's just kind of the next step in evolution. And it's great they launched this before they got permission, and, you know, they'll fully work this into the, you know, the long-term curriculum as they go. And then on the internship thing, I mean, that's really like a standard feature of these community college automotive programs is, you know, it's training and placement. And so, you know, most of the automotive programs in the Valley, you know, have very close relationships with the local dealers. And so, and that's really kind of the purpose of these programs is to be placing the, you know, kind of really motivated, high performing students into those jobs. And so, you know, Dan and others have great relationships with, you know, all the larger franchise car dealers in the area. So it's hard to guarantee like internships or job placements, but that's definitely a standard feature of what they do.
And I'll just add to that end that Delta College already has an existing internship program. So those would be Delta College costs that they're already, to the specific question around like where the costs go. That's a Delta thing rather than AB 617 dollars. Okay, I guess it's about time to wrap. We have some next steps. So sounds like we're getting in touch with Dan on a couple different fronts. Stephanie, you said you're gonna send out like a project plan template. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, we already have kind of that thing that I showed was something that was initially submitted that kind of got paused when we started this work in Stockton. But I think it'll be kind of returning to this project plan and starting to get into like more detail of a Stockton kind of specific one. But we do have kind of the backbones of what needs to be in the project plan to be approved.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, I think that's all we got. Are there other questions before we hop? All right, well, Scott, you named it at the top. It was the full time.
Jinxed it.
Yeah, I absolutely did. I think Jennifer, we're gonna work together with the area district to get the next one scheduled, right? We'll report out at the CSC meeting and then go from there, but nothing scheduled at the moment. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming all and for your feedback. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Good evening.
Bye all.